I've now described bioregional cosmolocalism, why we need it, and how we can make it happen. But the reality is that what I'm suggesting is a massive transformation. It's easy to be cynical of it actually happening, given what society is like at the moment. So in this video, I'm going to explain what I think the outlook is in terms of developing and spreading this new system over the next 30 years. There are three key things to remember here. The first is that I've been describing what the world can be like in 30 years. That's a lot of time in which we can do a lot of work. The second is that there are already loads of people and organisations dedicated to building a better world, including many that are working on the specific areas I've been talking about. And as the years pass and climate change gets worse, more and more people are putting more of their time, money and effort into systemic change. And the third is that over the next years and decades, climate change is going to be very intense. I'll start with the outlook in terms of the probable effects of climate change. It is, of course, getting worse, and it will continue to get worse. At the moment, the majority of people in the West do realise it's going to get worse, but they haven't integrated this into their understanding of the future. Essentially, most people in the West are living as if the current global system will be able to cope. I think this is very unlikely. Here's an example of one way in which it probably won't. The Colorado River provides hydroelectricity that millions of people rely on. It also provides water for a vast amount of agriculture and drinking water for about 40 million people. This is done using two reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. Each of these lakes have one level below which they cannot provide hydroelectricity and another below which they cannot provide water. So that's 4 levels between the two dams. The water depths in those reservoirs have been decreasing for decades, and based on these past decreases, we can estimate when they might go below those critical levels. In summer 2022, looking at the rate of decrease over the previous 2 years and extrapolating with a straight line, the lake would be below all 4 levels by 2030. Looking at the decrease over 20 years, they would all be gone by 2040. Although there was a lot of precipitation last year, this has only increased the reservoir levels to what they were a couple of years ago. While this is a slightly simplistic analysis, it gives a clear indication that the Colorado River will probably stop providing water sometime in the 2030s, which is likely to result in widespread hunger in America. That's far from the only societal scale problem that will be happening then. Examples of other issues that will probably be happening in the 2030s include the Arctic being ice-free in the summer, causing havoc with the jet stream and northern hemisphere weather. There will probably be horrific mass death events in the so-called global south, because there have already been close calls, such as Chennai briefly running out of water in 2019, Madagascar nearly reaching famine conditions specifically due to climate change in 2021, and heat waves in parts of Asia getting close to unsurvivable temperatures. As well as being absolutely horrific in their own right, such events will probably cause mass migrations, with ever greater numbers of people trying to reach the West. I'm not describing these issues with an apparent focus on the effects in the West because suffering in the West matters more. It doesn't, and widening our circles of compassion to the entirety of humanity is very important. But in terms of the development of the capitalist system, unfortunately, what happens in the West does matter more. Economic collapses have already happened in various countries, a recent example being the Lebanon, but it hasn't affected the global system because it's happened in countries on the periphery of the system. The USA is right at the heart of today's global economic system. If or when the USA collapses, the current global economic system will collapse with it, and it will affect virtually everyone. Based on the evidence I've just described, that will probably happen in the 2030s. Fortunately, if we are prepared, cosmolocal networks can provide the answer. Because they are structured as networks that provide people with all the information needed to build nodes such as factories wherever they are. If people in thousands of towns and cities suddenly want to join a network, they can. They just need to put the network's tried and tested plans into place in their own area. So when the current system breaks and millions of people wonder what on earth they should do, cosmolocal networks need to exist so they can provide the answer. Of course, cosmolocal networks could also rapidly spread through the developing world, including in places like the Lebanon, Venezuela, Libya, and other societies that have recently gone through collapse. Unfortunately, a major limiting factor for this is likely to be capital, because most of it is held by people who are literally and metaphorically invested in the capitalist system. But by building global inclusivity into the networks from the outset, creating good mechanisms for capital distribution through the networks, and doing everything we can to move societal norms from acceptance of capital hoarding to expectance of capital distribution, we can maximize the alleviation of suffering for people throughout the world, and perhaps we will come out of the period of crisis in the 2030s with a truly equitable and resilient global system of bioregional cosmolocalism. To have a chance of success, those of us who want to make this future come true must spend the next few years, from this moment onwards, doing what we can to develop and spread bioregional cosmolocalism as quickly and effectively as we possibly can. There are a multitude of things to be done, so please think about what you personally can do, in your community, in your work, and through your financial support, for example. Personally, at the moment, I am designing cosmolocal networks that I hope to initiate, following leads on spreading the Future Guardian model, and continuing to envision and communicate exactly how we can make this transition actually happen. Finally, I must mention one last way you might be able to help. I want to dedicate myself to this work, but to do so I need money to pay for my living expenses, and at the moment it looks like I am going to have to get a job in January, which would greatly decrease the time I can dedicate to this work. The minimum I need to avoid this is £1,000 a month, which will cover my rent, food and other basic expenses. I've just opened a Ko-Fi account to accept donations, and I will put the details on the YouTube page. I also have a unique name, so by Google searching Paddy Le Floofy, you can find my website, which will also have the details. If you can afford to, please consider spending some money on allowing me to continue this work. But aside from that, and far more importantly, please do what you can to help bring about bioregional cosmolocalism, both in your own life and by spreading the word as far and wide as you can. Because this isn't about me or you. This is about all of us.